This interview is part of the James J. Blanchard Living Library of Michigan Political History.
I'm John Karikas with the American Petroleum Institute, and today we'll be talking with former Speaker of the House Robert Waldron on behalf of the Michigan Political History Society. Bob, can you tell us a little bit about your personal background?
What I like to say on my background, John, is that I was a Michigander born out of state when my dad was stationed in the Boston Navy Yard. My dad and my Michigan roots are from St. John's. I grew up in Michigan all my life. I went to the public high schools and went to University of Michigan Law School. I did go out of state to Dartmouth College, and I graduated from all those things. But I've worked in Detroit factories. I've worked for Cadillac. I worked for Briggs Manufacturing Company, and those experiences were just tremendous for my political career. And then I was in the Army, went in as a private, went through Communications Cadet School, and then lucked out. I flunked code, and so they didn't want me to do something like that. So I got into aviation gasoline supply, and believe it or not, John, API, when they hired me, didn't have the slightest idea that I knew octane from sextane or dextane or any other thing, but I did. I knew it very, very well. So I think that takes care of some of this background. The other background is that I practiced law for 20 years in Detroit, concurrently with 16 years in the Michigan legislature. And when I knew that I was going to be elected from Grosse Pointe, when I was nominated, well, I looked around to somebody to keep my store open, and I wound up with Tommy Brennan, and we ran a political internship for all sorts of people in Detroit for about 20 years, and we had people run through our shop like Brickley and Jim Ryan and Roman Gribbs, and so that was a lot of fun. We had a great time, and Tommy showed his brilliance by running two campaigns for the Con while he was the Common Pleas Court elect judge, one of the first judges that known Republicans just swept the Common Pleas Court. Well, those are sort of two careers. But anyway, that's the background. And then, while I was in Detroit, I was extremely active in the Republican Party. I was active in the Young Republicans in several congressional districts, right in downtown Detroit, and then I was Wayne County Young Republican chairman before I was Wayne County chairman later on. And so I guess that brings us pretty much up to date, and I think that the Political Historical Society would mainly want us to talk about the politics that I encountered when I was in the Michigan legislature.
You were also, as I recall, a huge Detroit Tigers fan. So you stayed.
Well, yeah, but I didn't go to very many games. I still am a fan, but I'm not a fanatic. But I can remember skipping school and going down to the World Series.
Were you a member, or are you still a member of the Mayo Smith Society? Remember that that group?
I do remember that group very well. As a matter of fact, last spring, in May, I stopped by and visited Dale Petrosky at Cooperstown.
That's great.
That was less than 6 months ago.
That's great.
And
Dale was the general manager, I think, of the Mayo Smith Society for a while.
He and his brother started it.
That's right. Okay.
And then he went on to, he was, well, that's his biography.
As we were discussing your involvement in Wayne County politics, it seems that that was also about the beginnings of the Soapy Williams era, that Governor Williams was elected.
Yeah, well, I graduated from law school in '49, and Soapy was elected in '48. So I was active in the recounts for the 1950 and 1952 elections. Kelly and Alger, respectively, I believe. And so I was active in that, and I wrote the constitutions for the young Republicans of the 1st, the 13th, and Wayne County. So all this time, Soapy was my governor.
Yes.
Later, I was his state representative, and he was my governor.
You ran for the first time in 1950?
Yeah, but that was just for the hell of it.
Okay, but first elected then in 1954.
Yeah, but 1950, believe it or not, was a horrible hodgepodge. 21 state representatives were elected at large in Detroit and Harper Woods. It was the damnedest thing. Nobody knew. When the Democrats first were elected at 21, I've forgotten just when, they all thought they were going to Washington. And then in 1940...
What a disappointment Lansing must have been.
Yeah, and then in 1946, all the Republicans got in, and there were all these terrific guys that ran hoping they'd never win. And they all went to the legislature, and in the legislature wound up, there was only 100 then, 95 to 5. And of course that didn't work very well.
Well, that began to change. Obviously, the numbers became.
Soapy changed that, but I ran seriously. I didn't run seriously at all in 50. I was precinct delegate and stuff like that. I lived on Seward and 2nd in those years, and in 1950, I guess I lived on Rivard and Jefferson downtown, and. But anyway, in 1954, I seriously ran, and we ran a primary with 8 candidates, and 6 of them were preferred by the Civic Searchlight, 6 of us. And I had more experience in running than any of them, and so I won. And I was the best qualified of the bunch, and I don't mean to be immodest about that, but I just figured that if I weren't, I had no business running. And so I just said that. And my campaign literature was almost identical to this, which was a campaign material I used about 14 years later. Almost identical, except it was an application to represent the people of Grosse Pointe and Harper Woods.
As you showed us before this taping too, it's not a puff piece. There's lots of specific
meat in it.
Specific information in there. Your positions are spelled out clearly. There's not pictures of the children and the parks and the playgrounds.
One of them we had a picture of. One of them we had pictures.
But it's quite a contrast to today's handouts.
This really laid it out. And I remember my first one, my very first campaign. I said that the job of a state legislator is to lead the district, that you are hired by the district to be their expert. You don't go back to them and ask them what to do. You go back to them and you say, well, now, what are all the facts and what do you think I should do and all of that stuff. But you have to decide that. And and I believe that a person going into politics should have a philosophy, a measuring stick by which he measures almost every piece of legislation. And if the people in your district know your measuring stick, they're going to know how you're going to vote on almost everything. And as John C. Calhoun said, oftentimes if you are going to work, the job of democracy is not to sacrifice yourself to the masses, but for the masses. And very often, if you work for them, you must oppose them and educate them. And the people of my district bought that, so they bought me.
Do you have any idea whatsoever what that campaign might have cost?
Practically nothing.
No radio ads?
No, I didn't even do direct mail. I think my campaigns never ran more than $3,000, and we used to distribute this door to door with little leaguers and stuff like that, and
I used
people
to do
like
that.